But if you follow that methodology, you'll stick to it. And every year, if you increase your savings by 1%, it's amazing the compounding effects that will have over 20 or 30 years.
Just avoiding the lifestyle creep that you can find yourself getting as soon as you get that first job. If you learn to live on less, it doesn't, you don't miss it.
Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell, and welcome to the new year, David. 2025 has arrived.
Where are the flying cars? I was promised flying cars by 2025.
You sent around an alleged greeting from your brother Lou, our compliance officer. I'm not sure he was the author of this, but it's the season's greeting from your lawyer. It's on the screen for those watching on YouTube. For the benefit of those of you listening on radio, I wish you, but in no way guarantee, a reasonably Merry Christmas and or festive period, including but not limited to a reasonably happy 12-month period from the date hereof. It just gives you the warm fuzzies, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and that's why we're so happy to have those folks in the general counsel and compliance, making sure everything we do stays in line.
God bless us one and all. Speaking of the warm fuzzies, for a lot of us here in Nebraska, David, and you are now a season ticket holder with the Big Red, something that hasn't happened in nearly a decade, a bowl victory for the Cornhuskers.
Well, I just want to point out that, I didn't live here in 2016, so I moved here in 2017, and this is our first winning season and first bowl victory, obviously, since I've lived here. But it was awesome to see us pull off the victory in the Pinstripe Bowl, even though it seemed like at the end there we were getting a little leaky bucket syndrome there towards the end. But it was great to see. I think there was some class act shown there, and it was great for Ramir Johnson, the running back, to get his touchdown, who's exactly from New York.
MVP.
Yeah, so that was kind of neat to watch.
The whole week, it sounds like it was a great experience in New York. As a matter of fact, we have to revise a trivia question that we used on this show, David. So the question now is, what do Ronald Reagan, Nelson Mandela, Sylvester Stallone, Matt Rule, and David Brooks all have in common? We'll give people a beat or so to come up with that one. I know you know what it is because you've done it before. Well, the Cornhusker team, including Matt Rule, got to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, they rang the opening bell last week. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that was a fun experience.
Added Matt Rule to our trivia question there. Now, before we leave this topic, David, you are a student of leadership. And so I've had my doubts, I have to confess, but do you think Matt Rule is the right guy to get Nebraska into the playoffs and back into the national picture?
Well, I tell you, I think he's a good leader. Bad leadership is shown up everywhere. So, give you an example. You go back about a year ago, there's an NFL team that let Matt Rule go. Well, 2 years ago, right? Last year, that NFL team, the Carolina Panthers, had two quarterbacks on their team, one by the name of Baker Mayfield, the other one, Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
Both of them have thrown for over 3,700 yards and are leading their teams into the playoffs, most likely, having unbelievable years. So there's also bad leadership that lets talent get away, right? Well, how do you define a good leader? Well, people want to follow that person. And we were just talking about Ramir Johnson. Could have easily left and gone somewhere else, got more playing time. There was younger bodies certainly coming around, but he stuck it out here, never favored.
6 years.
Yeah, 6 years. Yeah. And knew he was not going to, he was the starter all season, got his name on the big board, but knew he wasn't going to be just the featured back, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But men want to follow leaders. And so I think Matt Rule is a good leader in that respect. And you're seeing him, we went through the losing streak and you saw him immediately take action, right? We did not see that with the previous coach, which was my coach down for UCF, right? We joke about that all the time.
By the way. Are you excited?
Back at UCF.
As a USC alumnus?
It'll be interesting to see
maybe
that.
Maybe he can make the magic happen again
maybe
in the shadow of the Magic Kingdom.
And again, everybody deserves second chances, in my opinion, so good luck to Scott Frost there at UCF. Okay. But you saw him make a corrective change, right? He brought in Dana, the offensive coordinator,
Holgerson,
and assigned him for 2 years. And, of course, you've seen a spark in the offense. Now, again, I expect to announce a change in special teams leadership any second now.
Whoa.
We haven't seen that as of this recording, but yeah, leadership you have to hold people accountable. And you have to take action if you don't get the results you want. That's part of being a leader, and it's helping people find where they need to do. It's hard for me sometimes as a boss. Not everybody's going to stick around long term in the company. That's just a reality, right? But good leaders, people want to follow good leaders, and I hope that's what we've built here.
Well, speaking of leadership, David, actually in the New York Stock Exchange, which will be closed January 9th to mark the death of former United States President Jimmy Carter. Your thoughts on President Carter?
I think he was a great man, long-term philanthropist, Christian man, came from humble beginnings, peanut farmer in Georgia, Americus, Georgia. I actually know some people that know that family personally, but my younger brother, who's a CPA, lives down in South Georgia. But anyway, he was a great man. He was a terrible president. I'm sorry, by just about any way you measure it up. Our budget got out of control. Inflation was a train wreck under him. He basically kind of bent over to the Shah of Iran and he carte blanche. And anyway, new leadership came in, and we saw a change of leadership at that point when Reagan came in, and the hostages were returned home immediately, right? I mean, I don't want to talk bad on the gentleman's grave. He's a good man and had a lot of great intentions. He was a terrible leader.
Served the nation, too. I think he served in the Navy.
Yes.
So we'll give him that, too. But you can disagree with somebody's performance as president and still say he was a good man.
Oh, absolutely.
I like
that. I don't think Bill Clinton's the greatest man. He was a pretty good leader. I mean, just the opposite, right?
Policy-wise, probably more successful.
So again, people sometimes, why do you talk so much politics? I'm like, look, we care about the policies that people enact, and don't be Switzerland. Have an opinion. I always say people are like, oh, you shouldn't talk about that. I've got an opinion just about anything. If you just ask me.
David, you sent the team a chart about corporate insider buying, and tell us what we see in this chart.
It's kind of hard to see on the screen right now, but if you're watching on YouTube, this is tracking, at least for the last dozen years or so, insider buying or selling, if you will, and we've not seen this level of selling since the Great Recession.
When a lot of us hear insider buying, we're not talking about cheating. This is not insider trading.
These are C-suite level executives that have to record their purchase and sales of stock. So obviously, if you see a publicly traded company and you see the executives of that company continue to invest their own salaries and bonuses back into the stock buying shares of that company, that tells you that they believe.
Should be reassuring.
Yeah, absolutely, because they believe in the company's growth, et cetera. When you see them selling, that tells you that they are not so certain about the future and they're trying to at least protect their own and diversify. Now, some selling is normal. They should be diversifying if it's their 90% of their net worth, but this level of selling is awfully scary. Now, we've covered it earlier, but we've had over 1,600 CEOs resign of publicly traded companies this year, the highest on record. That's another sign that people are not very rosy on the future.
Well, so I'm looking, the dotted line is a baseline over the last 14 years.
Of kind of how low it's gotten,
we're
correct. Yeah.
Diving even down
we've
below
crushed way
that
below that.
in the
So
last year or so.
There's quite a bit of selling going on.
All right. And then I want to ask you about you threw a term at me here that I had not heard before. I'm looking at a chart that says whenever the S&P 500 outperforms the equal weight S&P by more than 12%, we have historically entered a recession soon after. What is an equal weight S&P, and what are you seeing here?
Okay, the S&P 500 is the most commonly tracked index. It's a basket of 500 stocks, right? But the way the index is tracked and its price is it's a market-weighted index. The higher your market cap, the bigger the value of your company, the more weighting you get. In other words, Apple was almost at $4 trillion about a week ago in market cap, so a big behemoth, right?
Well, and the whole Magnificent Seven, and
absolutely,
they really skew things.
They skew the weighting because basically the top 10 stocks are 35% of the weighting basically right now.
Yeah.
So it skews the weighting. So one way to look at is what we want to look is we want to know what's the breadth of the market. Is the entire market participating if things are good? So you can equal weight it, right? And there's ETFs. There's one you can track called RSP by Invesco that tracks the equal weight S&P 500. So if we took 500 companies and gave them each the same weighting, right, like 0.2% for each company across the board, it's a very different picture that the index gives you if all 500 companies are participating or not. And so what we have is we have periods of time where the index itself, the market-weighted index, outperforms the equal-weighted index. Long-term, the equal-weighted outperforms the other, just so you know.
Okay, well, let me see if I can connect a couple dots if I'm tracking you. Because a few weeks ago, we were talking about the fact that first week of December, most of the stocks on the S&P 500 were in decline, and yet the S&P hit, I think, 4 record highs.
Correct.
That first week of December, but it's because the big boys were doing so well,
carrying all the freight, right?
That it compensates for the majority that were in decline.
Right.
Okay.
So you want to look under the hood to see the breadth of the market. Is the economy really healthy?
Well,
If all these
now
companies,
this makes sense.
So whenever this number, and this chart is basically that we're showing, is basically showing you when one outperforms the other. When the market weighted index, the way it's actually listed, outperforms the equal weight by more than 12%. It's basically been 100% indicator of a recession right around the corner. In other words, you get this very defined narrow leadership. It can only last for very short periods of time. The dot-com bubble was an example. In 2008, we had it happen. In COVID, right before COVID, we had it with FANG stocks. Now we have it the Magnificent Seven. And again, it's a precursor to something that's probably coming because everything reverts to the mean.
Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, that's FANG, I think.
Yeah, NVIDIA, et cetera.
Yeah. Great. Up next, financial advisor Alex Murray is one of the rising stars at Retire Smart. We hear from him next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. At Retire Smart, we are building a long-term, top-quality team for the families we serve. That means developing young talent. David, please welcome financial advisor Alex Murray.
All right, Chip, thank you so much. Yes, once again in the studio joining me is one of our advisors, Mr. Alex Murray, and legally we can actually add a couple of letters behind your name this time.
Yep, officially obtained the CFP designation.
Well,
so
congratulations.
CFP professional now. Yep.
So, well, tell our audience what that entitles, right? You had to have 6,000 of real professional hours in service. So we've now accomplished that. You've been on board for, over 3 years. So
yep, coming up on 4. So the 6,000 experience hours, you have to have your bachelor's degree, and then it's about a year-long course to go through each individual subject that it covers, and then it's a pretty rigorous 3-month study session leading up to the 170.
Yes, I do
test.
remember that, having to excuse a couple hours out here or there, and couldn't even take you out for an adult beverage, because you were studying diligently. But we were proud of you.
I got my life back, so it's good. No,
That's right.
But definitely worth the hard work. So.
Well, congratulations there. So, and since the last time you're on here, you also have set your life up here going forward. So do you want to let our audience know that you got engaged?
Yes, recently engaged. Did it out when we were at the Husker game out in California. So Malibu, California is a pretty cool place. So it was just the right place, right time. So
well, you're really going to have to learn about financial planning now. Congratulations on all fronts. So,
thank you. Appreciate it.
This is the first show of the new year, as Chip and I were just talking about. So I think you brought with you a list, if you will, of some common, at least financial New Year's resolutions. Obviously, New Year's resolutions become really popular. They have official, the second Friday of the year is, I think, the official quitting day when people give up on their resolutions, right? Gyms make all their money for January signups, and then 90% of those people are gone before February rolls around. But we're talking specifically when it comes to financial resolutions, which I think, I'm not a big person for resolutions necessarily each year, but I think people should take heart and make some sound decisions to improve their financial livelihood, et cetera, every year.
Yeah. And so number one on the list was just consolidate credit card debt or even consolidate debt. And so I think that's a major problem for a lot of folks. And most of the folks that walk in our door typically have all their debt paid off, maybe outside the mortgage.
Well, the amount of people that are in default on credit cards just hit a record. Not the number of people, but it's the highest it's been since 2009. But the dollar amount in default is a record number as we speak, right? And interest rates are an all-time high on this credit card. So that is pretty sound advice.
Compound interest working against you. So another one I thought was kind of a fad right now is look at ways to make money. And so this little portion here is talking about getting a side hustle. And I know you have some opinions on that.
I do. Now, listen, I worked 3 jobs and went to school when I was a very young guy. I was always about hustle, but I'm here to just tell you from pure experience, I was trading time for money at 3 different locations, basically, because at least I would hustle. I waited tables. I was a bartender, so was my wife. And at least there, the better service you gave, in other words, the more skill you had at your job, typically the higher wage you would earn, in other words, higher tips. But what I would tell people is rather than running out and doing a side hustle, working, listen, I used to own pizza restaurants, and most of our audience knows that. I had tons of guys that worked 9 to 5 career jobs and then came in and worked what we call the dinner rush and delivered pizzas. I had one guy, I remember, for 4 years he worked for me to pay off the family pool. He had a couple kids, he wanted to pay for a pool, and basically dedicate all his hours working for me part-time, tips and our minimum wage to pay for that pool. So I get it when people want to do that. But the reality is with technology today, most people, I think, would simply be better off to improve their skill set at their current job, become more valuable to their current employer, and therefore demand a higher wage, if you will, be more productive. And that's the society we are in reality, right? You always joke you get paid what you're worth. But in other words, if you were worth more money, the company would have to pay you or they'll lose you to a competitor. That's typically reality, right?
Yep. Double down, invest on yourself. You're better off doubling down, making yourself more valuable to increase that income. Otherwise, you just spread yourself too thin.
Well, your CFP is a great example. You did it because you wanted to have the credentials, number one, and 2, the knowledge base, being a younger advisor, at least in age and in tenure, a couple years in now, into our industry, right? And so that's a great way to do it. But it does come, I'm happy to do it. We put an incentive on there for you, a compensation incentive there. So you are going to get paid more money now because you've taken the time to invest in yourself. And it's like that in many medical fields, educational careers, et cetera. I always want people to do, though, and I don't want to get too far off track here, is do a cost-benefit analysis. So I have a sister-in-law that went and got her PhD in teaching, right? And she's been teaching middle school. She just retired this past year. But for the last 4 years, she got like a $3,800 raise because of the 2 additional degrees she got. But those 2 additional degrees were over $50,000 in expense, and it earned her less than half of that in the time until she retired. Now, it did add to her pension. So
math does a math on that.
Yeah, do the math, exactly. What are some other ones in there?
Some other ones in here would be some simple ones. So boost your retirement savings, find ways to increase your credit score. But an important one around the holiday time is update your beneficiaries.
So that is a great thing to realize. If you are not married, don't have any children yet, you still probably have retirement accounts at work. It's very important you understand who you have designated as the beneficiary on that account if something unfortunate would to happen to you. And so that is something you should look at basically every 2 to 3 years, looking at the beneficiaries across all your accounts, whether you've got $1 million in the 401k at work or you're just starting out. It's important information. I want to back up the other one that you talked about there, which was increasing the amount that you save. So I've taught a course called Financial Peace before with Dave Ramsey's fame, if you will. But I am not 100% believer in some of the things that they teach over there. In other words, I believe in the third rule. I've talked about it several times on this show. When you get a raise, most people get some kind of raise each year through work, cost of living raise. So let's just use 3% as a simple example. Put 1% more into your workplace retirement account, just because it's a set it and forget it mentality. You'll automatically be saving more. Put 1% more of that raise towards your debt reduction. We were talking about getting out of debt. And then take 1% and spend it on you and your family, your loved ones, extra date nights or whatever it might be able to afford with that, whatever that number is, because you earn the raise. You want to feel like you've got something. You should have something to show for it. But if you follow that methodology, you'll stick to it. And every year, if you increase your savings by 1%, it's amazing the compounding effects that will have over 20 or 30 years.
Just avoiding the lifestyle creep that you can find yourself getting as soon as you get that first job. If you learn to live on less, it doesn't. You don't miss it. So.
Well, you and I have just had the discussions, right? Your next step. You and Morgan will be getting married soon, and you're talking about, hey, at some point we're going to be looking to purchase our first home.
Yep.
That's a very common and great investment for most people. I always advise younger folks, if you can, look at that first home as something that you'd want to live in 5 to 7 years and then keep as a rental. Think about it that way. Think of it as an investment. It's not probably your forever home. As your income and et cetera grow, as your career grows in life, you'll be able to buy a bigger, nicer house, et cetera. But if you can keep that as a rental, that is passive income that will pay for itself. And
that's really
these are
changed.
really ways to increase net worth.
And that's really changed the type of house that we're looking at versus, maybe what we could qualify for on a mortgage versus what actually makes sense.
Yeah. Well, your brother, who was a mortgage broker forever, right? They would, you can afford $400,000 mortgage or whatever. It doesn't mean you need to take the max mortgage out. My old rule of thumb, and it's very difficult for someone buying a house today, I get it, was 20%. If your housing is 20% or less of your pay, you're not going to be able to call house poor. I remember my very first mortgage payment was like just over $1,000. This is on a $96,000 house. Okay. So way back in the early 90s. And I was like, oh my God, $1,075. And we refinanced at 7.5%, which was a significant drop in our interest rate at the time, and got that payment to drop by like $110. And we thought we hit the lottery. It was awesome. But I also tell people that when you're buying that first house, the good news is the housing payment stabilizes and your income increases, and it becomes much more sustainable in future years. But don't become house poor. You don't need to have 2 brand new cars in the driveway when you're buying your first house, et cetera. Exactly. Live within your means.
Yep. And then a few other ones is just improve your financial literacy. So finding that financial podcast, whether it's here or there's a bunch of great ones out there right now, but finding something where you can consistently continue to learn. And
it's financial literacy. There's a couple simple rules I'll give out here for younger listeners to our show. The rule of 72, real simple. Whatever interest rate you're earning or paying, divide it into 72. And that's how long it takes whoever's winning in that battle to double their money. So in other words, why would someone lend you money on a credit card? Well, if I'm lending you money at 20% interest, I'm doubling my money in less than 3 years.
Yep.
And if you're paying, 9% interest on a car loan, basically the bank is doubling their money in a very short order of time, in 8 years, et cetera, before your car is, the payoff may even happen in that. So if you're earning interest, if you're investing your money, it's the same goes for you. If the S&P has averaged over 9%, which it has for over 100 years, every 8 years you're doubling your investment. So think about the power of compounding. And the only problem with compounding is if you interrupt it, according to Charlie Munger, the late, great Charlie Munger. So, Hey, this was a good list. I can't believe that this went fast and furious, but we are already out of time for the segment. So do you have any personal resolutions for the new year?
Saving up for a house and paying for a wedding. So,
all right. Financial discipline. We love to hear it. Thank you so much, Alex, for stopping by the studio.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Chip, what do we have next?
Up next, you have questions. David Brooks has answers. Q&A is next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Into the Q&A we go. David, the first question is about retirement timing. I'm 55, and I've talked to 2 financial advisors at different firms about retiring at 60. One of them says I should work longer. The other says I can go ahead and retire at 60. At first, I was inclined to work with the guy who told me to go for it and retire at 60. Now I'm having second thoughts. How do I know he's not just telling me what I want to hear?
Yeah, that's a great question. So math would be how you would know. So regardless of the 2 you've gone to, has either one of them showed you a written inflation-adjusted income plan where your income's coming from? In other words, you're working right now, you're earning a salary, you say you want to retire at 60. Well, do you have pension income? I don't know this at this point in time. Most people do not in America today. So you have two types of income when you retire. You have guaranteed income, non-guaranteed income. Those are the only 2 types of income. So when I say guaranteed income, I'm saying it's guaranteed basically by the federal government or by a pension plan or your state, right? So if you're blessed to have a pension, that might be one form of guaranteed income you could turn on as early as 60. But if you're going to wait and rely on something like railroad retirement or Social Security, you cannot turn it on at age 60. You're going to have to wait. And the full retirement age for anybody that is not acquired age now is 67 and may get pushed back in future legislation. So what are you going to do for income between, say, 60 and 67. Do you plan on turning Social Security on at 62? Could be the right decision. I doubt it, though, because you're going to take a 30% reduction if you do. And are you going to use your assets to pay for that income in the meantime? What if we walk into a recession in the first couple of years of your retirement? Has someone modeled this out? Like I always like to show people, hey, what if you retire January 1st, 2000? Would that be a good one to look at? Sure. Because if our plan can sustain that, you're probably okay, because we had two, not just one, two major bull or bear markets happen in that first decade of retirement. And if your plan is built to actually sustain that kind of volatility, you're probably in good shape. So I would ask you is, do you have an inflation-adjusted income plan? Do you have risk management in place that would protect the assets that you have now so that they're not fully at risk as you're this close to retirement? And do you understand what your income needs are? Has someone actually shown you this? And then do you understand how you're going to get taxed on that income in retirement? There's a lot to unpack here. So yes, I would tell you, I'd be worried the guy just says, yeah, take it, because sometimes that's someone trying to sell you something and they want to make you feel good, so you move forward with them. But if you're 55 and you're not going to retire for at least 5 years, you're at least doing the right thing by getting a couple of opinions, in my humble opinion.
Well, you know, two words pop into my head when I think about this. Those two words are report card.
Yeah, it's kind of convenient how we do offer something that's exactly
what we do.
At least
but
from
we
our
put it on
standpoint.
paper. You get a written grade. And by the way, we don't do it to shame you. If you get a bad grade in certain areas, well, good. I mean, that's just to alert you. Now, what can we do?
Because
to
yes, you have
address this?
time, and that's the great news. Is here's somebody looking out 5 years. How many times do we have people walk in the door? I want to retire in 3 months. Well, sometimes we have to say no. At least that's our recommendation. But yeah, I would just tell you, it'd be a great candidate to get the report card. We'll show you, at least in our methodology, if that was the right answer or not.
David, you were just talking about income, guaranteed income, non-guaranteed income, and so forth in retirement. Well, the next question is about retirement income. I'm being forced into early retirement at the age of 57 from my government job. I'll have my pension, but that won't be enough to live on. I'm too young for Social Security and too young to withdraw from my IRAs. Do I need to find another job?
Okay, so there are certain jobs in the federal government, and this particularly is like FBI agents, field agents, DEA, et cetera, where it's mandatory retirement at age 57. So I don't know what your job is, but there's only a limited number of government jobs that force the retirement at 57. So I will let you know there's something called the Rule of 55, and you may or may not be aware of. But if you have assets in the TSP, or prior 401ks, because
what is TSP?
So that is the government's version of a 401k, if you will.
Okay.
That's the thrift savings plan, and that's where you put dollars away. You can access those dollars if you're retired prior to age 60 without paying the penalty. There's no 10% penalty if you are in fact retired. If you take another job, basically, and you earn a small amount of income, and then there's supplemental income most government employees are getting to get them to age 62, a supplemental benefit within their pension. We actually are very familiar with what's called FERS and SERS. These are the two main forms of federal benefits for retirees, and we'd be happy to put together a plan for you. Actually, we have software that's just for this. For federal employees to help them understand how they can retire, when they should retire, or if they. And the other thing is, listen, at 57, you're still relatively young in today's terms. So a lot of people we find still want to go work. And if that's the case too, then what we would do is put in a tax planning instrument here to show you how you may want to start moving some of the dollars around in that TSP or 401k that are in that tax deferred bucket into potentially a tax-free or at least a tax-advantaged account, so that you do not have to pay higher taxes on those distributions at some future date. Again, you don't know what you don't know. We say it all the time. There's so many moving parts to this. This is why you need to work with somebody who's not just going to help you choose the investments of your retirement, but actually show you how to have a written income plan, risk adjust it, taxation calculations, legacy planning, what if scenarios. If you leave this earth early, are you married? Are you single? Who are the beneficiaries? Who do you want taken care of? So many factors go into a well thought out, holistic financial plan. We happen to call it a SMART plan here. We want you to do it the smart way, right? So again, the great candidate for a report card there as well.
David, another question about income or how it's spent, I guess, in retirement. I've heard you talk about figuratively twisting people's arms to get them to spend money in the go-go years, the first decade or so of retirement. Isn't that a dangerous strategy? Doesn't it increase the risk that they'll run out of money in their slow-go or no-go years and be destitute?
Well, if they don't have enough money, we wouldn't let them spend the money. So yes,
That's why you do the written planning up front and map it all out.
But we have found that the majority of our clients are going to have way more money than they're going to need when it comes to what their ask is, and that's what real planning is. So, how much money do you want to spend in retirement? Net in today's dollars, we will calculate inflation, taxation, all these other issues on top of that, and then figure out where we're going to pull this income from. And again, there's going to be guaranteed income and non-guaranteed income. So we're going to know which bucket to pull from, and then we can model through even market volatility and show you with pretty good probability whether or not you would be able to spend them out you want. And I can just tell you, after doing over a quarter century of doing this, Chip, most financial planners show people these just escalating from lower left to upper right charts of your spending pattern, inflation adjusted. They don't take into account when people want to spend the money. And listen, the whole point of retiring is so you can enjoy the life while you still have life left, right? The day you retire, you're going to have the best financial ability, mental ability, and physical ability you will the rest of your life, right? This is the way it is. The older we get, we're going to have mental decline, we're going to have physical decline, so we may not be able to do the things that really matter to us. And again, this is part of the questioning process you have to have with a good holistic planner. What are those bucket list items? What do you want to really accomplish? And then we just want to front load that spending so we make sure we take care of what matters, because I can tell you we're not guaranteed time, right? It's just I just went to a client funeral here about a week ago. It's just part of what we do because we have a lot of older clients. We lose clients every few weeks, basically, and it reminds us every day, hey, what matters to you? That's the whole point. The money's just a tool, right, to provide for you. So we want to make sure we get you thinking about what really matters to you.
Up next, there's a new kind of addict showing up more frequently at addiction treatment programs, but the addiction is financial rather than chemical. We'll tell you about it next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, we were spoofing your brother Lou at the start of the show. I'm not sure he really was the source of that attorney's holiday greeting, but Lou did flag this story for us. He saw it in the Wall Street Journal. More men are addicted to the crack cocaine of the stock market. Trading, investing, maybe it's chemical and that it triggers something in the brain. I don't know. But the story says, David, Gamblers Anonymous meetings are filling up with people hooked on trading and betting. And then there are apps out there, it says, that make it as easy as ordering takeout. This doesn't sound good, David.
Well, no, I mean, we have the reality. If you remember, it's been about a year and a half now, but we had a young gentleman take his life down in Lincoln on losses he didn't actually incur on one of these easy-to-access apps, trading some of the meme stocks. You had the movie come out, Dumb Money, which, we talked about here, the Roaring Kitty trader, and all these college kids all over the country following along. And they're exactly just gambling, if you will, and not understanding how it works, how investing works, et cetera. And they're trading, they're not investing, very different, right? But they're looking for that endorphin, that hit. On top of that, it's not just this, and my son, who does Noah, does a ton of research for this. He's doing research right now on like FanDuel and DraftKings, these gambling apps. I love the guy, Dave Portnoy, Barstool Sports, right? He actually just saved a pizza place in Boston not that long ago with a $60,000 donation. It was a nice gift, but he was advocating betting on stocks, the simple gambling during the shutdown, the pandemic. People were sitting at home, had idle cash, and they got addicted. They were using these stimulus checks to basically bet on penny stocks and gamble, and you get a win or two. It's the worst thing because now they're addicted to it, and it's a real problem. I mean, I'm disgusted watching sports now. If you watch an NFL game, right, we're getting into the playoffs now. It's about to happen. It's exciting. Hey, here's the parlay bet. Yeah. I mean, all the big networks into it. It's disgusting. Yeah. But this is where we are. And sadly, I can tell you, it's going to become a much bigger problem than it is right now. But people are gambling, whether it's on the stock market. And I mean, I can remember when I first started trading, I got a little addicted to it. It's a nice endorphin when you hit a short-term trade. Early in my career, I played a lot of option trades, and you would hit a 3 or 4 bagger, as we'd call them. I mean, overnight, you took your money and 5x'd it, that's pretty exciting and thrilling, which makes it seem really easy to go put it back in. And, it's just like at the casino. Why do slot machines pay out 98% of every dollar they put in? Because you're going to keep putting the dollars in. They're going to take all of it eventually.
There's a quotation from someone in the story here who says basically the same thing. He says, boy, it's so exciting and so easy to win a whole bunch of money all at once, but you can also lose everything just as quickly.
No, and we retired somebody who was a professional in this industry like 5 years ago right here in Omaha and worked for a large national firm and started trading some of these speculative options with a portion of the retirement assets and lost it all. And this was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, had enough assets that retirement is still okay, but could have been a much brighter future without that. But the addiction of it, and those were assets held away from us. We weren't the ones trading it, et cetera. But again, I caution people out there, do not get addicted to gambling or trading, et cetera, because it ends badly. And if you have adult children like I do, make sure you're talking to them about this stuff. I've had conversations with both my adult boys in the last 30 days on this very topic.
Well, and I hear cynics, David, who say, well, the stock market, that's just high-class gambling. All of capitalism is a gamble. No, wait a minute. Business owners work hard to make their businesses work. It's not just a roll of the dice. And even when it comes to the markets, whether it's you and our team and our apparatus and all the analytical tools we utilize, Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, there's all kinds of research that goes into investing. It's not just a blind gamble. It's not
Absolutely.
just a roll of the dice.
No,
so please keep that in mind.
It's so true and so important.
Hey, David, we at the top of the show, we were talking college football. And I want to get your take on this. There was a CNBC headline that said, what are the top 75 college sports programs? So what are they worth? And I was a little surprised, pleasantly surprised, to see Nebraska in the top 10. Ohio State, Texas, Texas A&M, Michigan, Alabama, Notre Dame, number 6. I thought Notre Dame might be a little higher. Georgia was 7th, and there's Nebraska at number 8 with Tennessee and Oklahoma rounding out the top 10. I don't know. I've always, the football team's been struggling so much the last 2 decades. I was afraid our brand value had fallen, but not according to this survey by CNBC. Hawkeyes of Iowa came in there at 21. Iowa State Cyclones just inside the top 50 at 48. So, David, I guess this is, they looked at revenue. They looked at things like NIL, name, image, and likeness spending on and by or for your athletes, number of alumni at numerous factors. I don't know. Are you surprised to see Nebraska in the top 10 in this category?
I actually was a little surprised to see them in the top 10. I was pretty confident they'd be in the top 25 just because they have such an iconic brand and it's been built. And that's just it. The legacy value really matters here, right? But it's revenue, TV rights, branding rights, merchandising, et cetera. You're right. Notre Dame has quite a unique brand. But the reality is they are being pitched right now, and I believe it's going to happen. Private equity wants to invest in these brands because they see the economic viability here. And we're just ironically talking about gambling and betting on sports and what have you. This is investing in sports, and I for one, would probably step up and purchase an investment like that let me invest in the brand like Nebraska, et cetera, and participate on the licensing and revenue deals because it is going forward. Let's face it, these college sports now, again, I don't like NIL the way it's structured today. I believe these athletes should get compensated. The revenue's coming because of their performance in some way, but there's got to be limits to it, and that's a whole other show we could probably do on that. But I do believe that you're going to see private equity invest, just like the NFL just approved private equity to come in and purchase. Baseball's allowed it for years, and these investments come in. I mean, a group came in and bought the Dodgers a while back for a little over $2 billion. And even I was like, man, how are they getting the valuation when the previous sale of the Dodgers was a couple $100 million and they paid a little over $2 billion? They sold TV rights, both local and international, for the Dodgers for almost $5.9 billion within 24 months of taking on the purchase. So that was a pretty good return on their investment. And here in the Big Ten, which now has 18 teams in it, we get, I don't know the exact number, but we receive a healthy check here at University of Nebraska
Right.
from those TV rights that pays for the football program basically all by itself, right? So these are solid investments as long as the consumer still shows up to watch them and invest in them. But anyway, it's interesting to see, and there's going to be opportunity to invest in this in the very near future, I believe.
Oh, we could just win a few more games. We'll be set. All right, David, in the time we have left, whenever I see something involving Disney, I love to get your take because as you and Alex were visiting about earlier in the show, back in your pizza hustling days, you ran a string of pizza restaurants in Orlando, one of which was right outside the doors of Disney. So you actually served this market. And Fox Business has the headline, Disney looking to entice guests by offering free summer vacation packages perk. It includes free food, as a matter of fact. Maybe Stadium Pizza is included in that food plan. I think that was the name of your franchise. Yeah. But Disney's taken a beating. I mean, Disney kind of came out on the short end in its wokeness battle with Governor DeSantis.
The stock got hammered by almost 60%.
Well, the numbers don't lie, do they? And so Disney is trying to hit the reset button to some degree. I'm just asking you, do you think this will work?
Oh, I certainly think it'll increase traffic for them at the parks, which is a good still moneymaker for them. The studios have not made money. The ABC purchase has not been a good one financially for them. Believe it or not, some of the legacy media assets they bought have actually cost them billions and billions of dollars on the bottom line. So what they're trying to do is increase the traffic flow and revenue. And if you haven't gone, Disney, I mean, it's expensive. Now, I haven't been inside a Disney park in I want to say probably 20 years since I've been inside one of the parks. I'm not the biggest Disney fan. I much prefer Universal Studios when you go to Orlando. My kids, my adult, we like to ride rides, way more rides for the bang for the buck, in my opinion, at Universal. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Disney's, the idea is it's a magical experience. It's still an iconic brand. And what's lost, though, is over the years, and I have friends that still work at Disney, 40 plus years they've been there, is the Disney magic is gone to a degree, right? It used to be, I mean, do you remember a Sunday nights Disney special would come on? There'd be a movie on Sunday night on, and you would watch that Disney movie, and I mean, it was family time, and it's just, that's not what they represent when you go anymore. And so I think they have to align their culture back to who their core customer is, because let's face it, who do they want to come down? They want a family of 5 or 6 or 7 to come spend a week there, because you're going to spend $7,000-$8,000 on that vacation in today's dollars very easily. And I mean, it's a great experience. Your kids remember. I remember the first time going to Disney World. It was they were open less than a year. We went. I had to reach up for the doorknob. Right. I still remember this with my grandmother watching me. We stayed at the Polynesian Resort, which is right there out front. And I forget and I remember we were too little, so I stayed with my mom's mom, my grandmother, me and my little brother in the room, and the rest of my older brother and sister got to go to the luau and what have you. We weren't old enough to even go, but that was back then. It was tickets. By the way, you paid like $6 admission, but you bought tickets per ride and what have you. And I just remember I was happy because I had my little Donald Duck when we went home. That was my favorite character. So I think Disney's trying to bring back the magic. We'll see if it happens.
That'll do it for this week, folks. Please visit our events page at retiresmartomaha.com to see everything we currently offer. No charge, no obligation for our events, but you do need to register. You can do it online or by calling 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Hey, if you make resolutions, try and stick with it, but make a financial resolution if you're going to make one at all. Have a blessed and prosperous week. Let's have a great 2025 and thrive in 25 is my motto.
Amen. Thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. For David Brooks and the entire team at Retire Smart, have a great week.